Alrighty. Amber, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to join us for tonight's webinar. We're thrilled to be able to provide this conversation and hopefully education for you tonight. My name is Emily Lenzini, and I am the Community Development Manager for Trumpet Behavioral Health. In case you are new to who Trumpet is, we are a leading provider in ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis Therapy, and we help individuals with autism spectrum disorder, social communication disorders, and developmental delays reach their full potential. We're located in 8 different states, and a comprehensive list of where we're located can be found on our website at tbh.com. So tonight's discussion is really meant to provide you with tools for managing behaviors. If you have questions specific to our services and processes, we'd love to connect with you. So please feel free to drop your information in the chat if you're interested in learning more about our services, and then I can reach out directly to you to connect with you. So before we jump into the webinar, just a few housekeeping items to go over. So this is a webinar. I know this virtual world, there's probably been lots of webinars and meetings that you've been attending, but you as attendees will see myself and Dr. Amber Valentino, who I will introduce here momentarily. So Amber has a presentation prepared, and if you have questions throughout the presentation, please pop them into the chat, and we'll leave time at the end of the webinar to go through and answer as many of your questions as we can. And again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We know it's late on the East Coast, so if you're on the East Coast, big kudos to you for spending your evening with us. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Amber Valentino. She's our Chief Clinical Officer, and she'll be leading us through this webinar. Amber, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you, everybody. It's exciting to be able to have this opportunity to chat with you. And as Emily mentioned, I imagine that you all had very busy days, and it's just nice to be able to spend time talking about this topic and sharing information with you and doing our best to equip you with the tools and the resources that hopefully will get you through some of the problem behavior that you might be managing with your own children or children of your loved ones. And so the title of this talk, as you know, of this chat, talk sounds so formal, we'll call it a chat, it is managing behaviors, which is a little funny to me because a behavior can be good too, but I thought that this would be the title that would get people to sort of raise their eyes and say, yes, that's something that I want help with, that I want to think about. And in fact, it's a very common request from parents, from grandparents, from people working with all children with disabilities, children without disabilities. Just how do I manage some of this problematic behavior that's popped up? So I tonight I'm going to walk you through some basics, some ideas behind behavior and why it occurs. And then I really wanted to make the information digestible and consumable. So I have the whole remaining part as 10 tips. So the end, I'll give you 10 tips, things that I think you can take away from this that will help you in the short term. And hopefully as you integrate more of them and think about behavior analysis and how it fits into your family, will help you in the long term too. Okay, but first I do want to just give you a little bit of information about myself. So I have a background in clinical psychology. I was trained as a child clinical psychologist. That part of my training came first, and then I found behavior analysis a little bit later in my career. And so I am also a board certified behavior analyst. My work history involves primarily working with children with autism. I spent about 5 years in Atlanta, Georgia, for anybody who might be in the South on the call tonight. And I worked at a large children's hospital, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And I was there for 5 years, and I worked in various clinics. I had a large specialty on language, but I also spent about 2 years in a severe behavior unit with kids who nobody else could really manage. They came to us for a day treatment program. sort of a bunch of stuff had been tried and hadn't worked. And so we were there to assess and then to treat their problem behavior. That feels like a long time ago, but it also feels short ago, not very long ago. But in 2012, I joined Trumpet Behavioral Health, and I've been with them ever since. And I've held various roles, seeing clients with all different presentations, and have held various roles, including managing a full caseload, to my role now where I am building clinical standards for the organization, providing training, doing a lot of outreach and support to the community like this, and I absolutely love it. So that's the formal side. The informal side is that I'm also a mom. This is a picture of my family. My son is not that little anymore. He's not a baby anymore, but I like this picture because I think it shows kind of how our family typically goes. It's definitely not the buttoned up jacket and formal picture that I showed you before. We are all over the place, and I'm managing behaviors too. So please know that when I talk to you tonight, I'm certainly doing so from the background of having knowledge in clinical psychology and child development and behavior analysis, but I'm also talking to you as a mom, as a parent who knows what it's like to be trying to cook dinner and have a child screaming in your face, or worse, or trying to figure out what to do about that. So please know I have that perspective as well, and I think that it adds to a lot of the recommendations that I'm going to make for you tonight. Okay, so the obligatory disclaimer I'm going to give you, this is information that's just for general purposes only. So this doesn't represent any professional relationship with Trumpet. And if you leave this talk today and you feel like you need a more specific assessment and treatment, seeking that advice from a board certified behavior analyst, and Trumpet has many of those, with a formal service agreement is really going to be the best way for you to go. Okay. So I want to start the conversation by talking about this idea of form versus function. And if that feels a little bit kind of out there for you, I'll break it down. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why you should care about this topic. So as a behavior analyst, I oftentimes will get questions from people, and people will say, can you tell me how to treat my child's aggression? Can you tell me how to manage my child's tantrums? And these are all very common questions, and people should be asking them. But I'll tell you that form, or that what the behavior looks like, is not all that helpful from a behavior analytic perspective. So let me describe that a little bit more specifically. So what a behavior looks like is important because we want to know, is a person punching somebody? Are they tapping somebody? And so we want to know that, but people can engage in all sorts of forms of behavior for the same reason, or because they serve the same function. And so when we talk about aggression, or we talk about self-injury, or we talk about disruptive behavior, that sort of just form of the behavior only goes so far. What we care about is why a person does what they do. And in the same sense that you can have different forms that have the same function or the same reason, you also can have the same form that has a different function, right? So one person can hit for one reason, another child can hit for a different reason, but the form still looks the same. And so when I talk to you tonight and I give you these recommendations, I do really want you to think about not just what the behavior looks like to you. And like I said, that is important. We want to know that because it is helpful to consider what the behavior looks like in the environment and things like that. But from a treatment perspective, that form really isn't all that helpful. What is most helpful is the function. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. And that's what I hope you take away from this training and from my suggestions. All right. So I want to just talk briefly. You'll see this term in the top of the screen called private events. And I promise I'm not trying to get you a dissertation in behavior analysis tonight, but I want to address this issue because I think that sometimes when we think about behavior analysis, we're thinking about the environmental variables. We're thinking about things in the environment that change behavior. And sometimes people think that maybe behavior analysts don't consider what we call private events. That is thinking, that is anxiety, or those things that happen inside the skin that maybe you can't observe, right? I can't observe somebody thinking. I can observe behaviors associated with thinking. I can observe maybe somebody, touching their chin or putting their eyes up in the air. But I want to address this. So private events, that is things that happen in the body, anxiety, pain, physical pain, headaches, they are important, and behavior analysts don't ignore them. But as behavior analysts, we really try to think about what's happening in the environment that's influencing a behavior, that's making it more or less likely to occur. And the reason for that is because if you get too far into the stuff that happens in the skin, you get into this thing called circular reasoning, where you start to say, well, he hits because he has anxiety. He has anxiety because he hits. And it doesn't really lead you to treatment. It doesn't lead you to the environment. Now, again, that's not to say, I'm a psychologist, so that's not to say that those things aren't important. It's absolutely important if a child is hungry, or if their head hurts, or if they're anxious. We want to think about all those things. But when we talk about treatment from a behavior analytic perspective, we're talking about what we can do in the environment to make behavior more or less likely to occur. And that's really the important variable. Now, we should really try and get support for some of those internal things, and we should take them in consideration, but they don't really help us a ton in terms of that treatment because we're focused primarily on the environment, what we can do in the environment to make behavior more or less likely to occur. Okay, so we talked about form versus function, what a behavior looks like versus why somebody does it. We talked about, okay, we're looking at the environment, we're looking at those outward behaviors, kind of what we want to treat, not highly focused on the internal events and that kind of circular going back and forth kind of reasoning. So let's move on and let's talk a little bit about, oh, sorry, let me move on. There was a little extra slide there. Why? So I kind of told you all about form versus function. Why do people do what they do? That's the golden question, right? Why do people do what they do? And this is going to help you when you say to yourself, well, why does a child do what they do? What does a child engage in aggression? Why does a child scream? Why do they poke their eyes out? Why do they hit their friends? Why do they hit their peers, right? People engage in behaviors for the same reason, regardless of whether the person is a person with a disability or the person doesn't have a disability, whether they're a child or they are an adult. And so I'm going to talk to you tonight about the 4 main functions of behavior. And these are not things that are specific to a person with a disability. They are basic functions that were identified many, many years ago by some really great psychologists and behavior analysts that told us, all human behavior can go back to these 4 main functions. And so when we think about, okay, well, these are the main reasons why somebody would engage in a behavior, that can help lead us, obviously, to a treatment. So that function, right? We want to know why. Why does somebody do what they do? And I'm going to tell you that this evening. Okay. So more importantly, why does my kid do something? And I can categorize these into just generally 2 main categories, and that is to get something or to get out of something. And I'm going to break that down a little bit more for you. But if you can remember that, to get something or to get out of something, that's going to be super helpful in when we talk about treatment and how to think about our child's behavior and how to respond. Okay, so let's talk about the first reason, attention. This is a common function or reason why behavior can occur. If you want to have a little bit of fun, you can think very briefly about your own behavior or the behavior of your parents or somebody that's not your kid and think about how attention maintains certain behaviors. So a very simple example is social media. Anybody that's on social media, you know that social media is built upon attention maintained behavior, right? If you do something, you get comments, you get likes, people engage in all of this attention giving behavior. And so you see that social media behavior, those posts, those pictures really spike up because there's being attention provided for it. And so that's sort of a real life example that we all really can relate to. But a lot of our kids engage in behaviors because those behaviors do a really great job of accessing attention. This is a normal function. It's something that can easily be shaped up. I'm sure that you can think about a time, probably tonight, when you were in your kitchen and you're trying to cook dinner and, you know, an alarm's going off and you can't pay attention to your kid 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so of course you're going to restrict attention for some time. And for some kids, when that attention is restricted, particularly if they don't have the language to say, hey, mom, hey, dad, look at me, I'm over here, come play with me, they may start to engage in behaviors to access your attention. And some kids fall upon some aggressive behavior or disruptive behavior, problem behavior. And it can be very, very effective, right? Not because we're intentionally trying to make that behavior happen again, but the child learns like, hey, if I am off in the corner and I'm doing something and you know, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa are paying attention to me, I don't quite know how to say to them, please pay attention to me, but I learned that if I bang my toy on the side of the wall really loud, of course your natural reaction is to, hey, what's going on, what are you doing, what's going on, right? And then maybe the next time you don't do it as quickly and the banging turns into, you know, taking the toy and throwing it at the brother, and that of course gets your attention, right? So it can happen very normally, it can happen very naturally, but attention maintained behavior can be shaped up very quickly because it's a normal part of our interactions with our kids, that when they are not having attention, they do something, particularly if they do something we don't want them to do, we pay attention to them. And this is a really important function because a lot of people, self included, a little admission on my part, I've done this several times in my own parenting journey, and that is, they might say, well, I think I need to reprimand him. Okay, he throws the toy, and you say, Sam, don't do that. Don't throw your toy. No, don't throw your toy. And let me tell you, from the kid's perspective, it doesn't really matter whether it was quote unquote good attention or bad attention, it was still attention. And so just what that child learned in that behavior environment interaction is, I did something that got the attention, regardless of what that attention looks like. And so that's a very common mistake that people make. And I'll give you some tips on how to handle that and how to manage it. But so what feels like a reprimand, what feels like I'm telling my child not to do that thing, can actually have a reinforcing function. I'll talk about what reinforcement, but it can actually make it happen again, make that attention, that problem behavior happen again. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but that's how you can test it, right? If you quote unquote reprimand or tell your child they'll do something and they do it again, then that reprimand didn't work, right? It didn't work in the way that you intended it to. It's the continuing to happen. And so we probably have this dynamic of child does something, attention comes, regardless of what it specifically looks like. Okay, so that's one reason. Okay, why else? Why else do people engage in behaviors? More specifically, why does my kid engage in problem behavior? The second reason is I really don't like this word, but I'll use it because it's used it in the field, and then I'll break it down. But it's tangible, it's access to stuff, right? Particularly for kids who aren't developing language as quickly as their peers, or their language is a little bit stalled, or it's not as fluent as it could be. Just like us, just like anybody, we want stuff. We want things in our environment. We want that book. We want that globe. We want that train. And sometimes those things, those tangible items, those toys, those amazing things aren't accessible, or we're being told, no, we can't have them. You can't have that right now. And if you don't have a language to say, but mommy, I want it, or give me that, or hey, go get that for me, well, what are you gonna do? You're gonna start to figure out, how do I get that thing? How do I get that thing that I want so badly? And problem behavior can shape up, right? You can probably think of this scenario. I'm trying to think of some common ones. But in a feeding situation, right? We're sitting down to dinner, and a child's not eating, they don't want the thing you gave them, and they start to scream and cry, and okay, so we're gonna take that food away, or maybe not, or we just start bringing out the cookies, or something that's a little bit more preferred. And the child sort of learns, okay, well, if I want this other thing, I can engage in some of these behaviors and I'll get them, right? Or even just a simple scenario, right? It's time to leave the park, or leave something that you like, or you can't have something. We're about to have dinner, you can't have cocoa melon right now, on the computer, on the phone. Well, if I really want that thing and I don't have the language to tell you, I might cry, I might tantrum, I might aggress, I might hit, I might do all sorts of things. And usually, even if people try to hold out a little bit, even if they try and say, okay, no, I'm not going to give you that thing, usually something is produced because of that, right? So some good thing comes as a result of that problem behavior. Even if it isn't the exact thing they wanted, there's usually some item that gets produced, because who wants to see their kid cry? Who wants to see their kid tantrum, right? You want to calm them down. You want to make them happy. And so, but what that teaches is, well, when I want things, I can get them. I can control my environment. I can get them in a way that makes me happy, right? That gets me those good things. So, okay, so attention, tangible, right? I want your attention, doing things, getting it. I want those items. I want those toys, doing things, getting them. Those are the two reasons. Let's move on to the third. Escape. So not necessarily escape in the sense of I'm, leaving the house, although some kids do engage in elopement, which I always find funny that we call it that, but that's what we call it. They leave the house, but just getting out of things, right? You've asked me to do something and I just don't want to do it. Little teaser here, we engage in escape, maintain, problem behavior all the time. That's just a fancy way of saying, if we don't want to do something that's not fun, we're sick. We can't go to that meeting today because we have a conflict, right? Or something pops up. We engage in these behaviors all the time, but the idea being there's something aversive about that demand, or that instruction, or that place I'm supposed to be, or that thing I'm supposed to be doing. And so I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to get out of it. I'm gonna cancel the meeting. I'm gonna call in sick. I'm gonna make up a reason why I can't be there, whatever. And so we do this all the time. Our kids do it too. It's a little bit more kind of focused when you think about it in the sense of problem behavior, in that a lot of times it's that we've asked our kid to do a simple instruction, right? Or pick up your toy, or time to get in the bath. Maybe kid doesn't like the bath, right? Or they're doing something real fun. They're playing in the mud. They don't want to get in the bath. You've placed some sort of demand. You've placed some sort of instruction. You've told them you got to do something. And the kid's like, wait a minute, I don't want to do that. Which is a lot of time, which is often the case, right? We're parents, so we have to tell our kids to do things they don't want to do. We have to tell them, and they can't, engage in all these just preferred activities all day long. We have to say, you can't do that. You got to go do this thing. You got to do this thing. In fact, sometimes if you're anything like me, I feel like I do that all day long. Right, I just tell my kid all the things he has to do, and I don't want to do them. He doesn't want to do them. Okay, well, especially if I don't have the language to tell you I don't want to do that thing, well, then you can get some problem behavior. Punch, hit, scream, swipe the materials off the table, slap you in the face. And when those things happen, our natural reaction is to release the demand. And maybe it's not as obvious as that. Maybe it's not, okay, you don't have to, but maybe it's, okay, well, maybe you can have an extra minute. Do you need some more time? Do you need 5 minutes? Do you need to take 10 more minutes out in the mud before you come in for a bath? Or, okay, well, if you come inside, at least you don't have to take a bath, but you have to, you could sit on the couch, right? You get the idea. We sort of alter the request or the demand or the instruction in a way that gives that behavior some function. It says, I can have control over my environment. I can change the demand. I can change the instruction by doing this, by engaging in this behavior. And so this stuff can get shaped up, right? But it's very common function, right? So to get out of the stuff I don't want to do, especially for our kids that are in instruction, and that's a big part of their lives. They're in intervention. They're in sort of a one-on-one teaching setting a lot. There's a lot of demands. There's a lot of things they're being told to do that has to be done very thoughtfully and carefully. So you have a kid who really enjoys instruction, wants to do it, but you can easily have a situation where a kid says, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm done. Okay, so how do I tell you that? I don't have a word quite yet. So, well, maybe I'll just throw your stuff off the table, or maybe I'll throw this water container at you, right? And that's my way of communicating. And then that, gets shaped up all the time. Okay, so we've covered some of the three main, what we call social functions. That is, somebody has control over them. Somebody is giving you something or taking something away. The next one is what we call automatic. Now, this is a little bit different in that this behavior, still treatable, but this function, this behavior happens not because of anything that's being changed by somebody else in the environment, but because the behavior in and of itself feels good. So if you'll just think for one moment, if you could just take a moment and think about a behavior that you do that nobody necessarily attends to, but you still do it. So these might be things like twirling your hair, or mine is a leg kick. I kick my leg. Nobody's saying to me, Amber, good job kicking your leg, or Amber, don't kick your leg, or Amber, have a coffee for kicking your leg, right? Nobody's saying that, but the behavior feels very reinforcing to me. It feels good, right? For whatever reason, we don't have to get into the reason it does feel good, but it feels good when I kick my leg a little bit like that, back and forth, or I rub my fingers together, or I twirl my hair like this, or biting the fingernails. That's a very, very, very common one, right? And so regardless of whether somebody's changing your environment or not, automatically maintained problem behavior, that function, is occurring because the behavior itself produces its own reward. It produces its own reinforcer. It's a little different. You sometimes can see some of the more kind of stereotypy, or what's a common name in stimming, self-stimming. You may hear that as a layman's term to describe the form of it. Not always. You can have some of that form of behavior that has one of those social functions that I just described, but you sometimes can see some forms of that. The pulling one's hair, wringing one's fingers, rubbing one's hands together, flapping one's arms because it just feels good. That's the best way to describe it. Sometimes people think about this behavior, not just that the behavior in and of itself feels good, but also that maybe it reduces some pain or something like that. And that those are both fine ways to think about it. Regardless, the behavior itself is producing its own reward, regardless of what anybody else is doing. Okay, let me check my time. Doing good, 7:30. Okay, so we have our 4 functions. those are the reasons. Now, we can't get into this tonight. Things can be what's called multiply maintained. So they can have an escape and an attention function. You can have a tangible and an escape function. Things can go together. It's not always that clear cut, but if you isolate those 4 reasons, it can really help you understand your child's behavior and then lead you toward a response that's going to not allow it or make it continue again. Okay, so on that note, I want to take a drink of water. And then I want to talk to you about a really important concept, and that concept is reinforcement. Okay, you've probably heard me using that term several times today, and you probably have heard that term yourself many times, but you probably have heard it incorrect. You've probably heard the word reinforcement incorrect because people use it incorrectly all the time. I want to tell you what reinforcement means in the context of behavior analysis and everything we're talking about today, because it really matters and it's important. So the only reinforcement isn't about a sticker or a piece of candy or a reward. Do not think about it that way. The only thing that reinforcement means is that the behavior increases in the future. Okay, so if you see a behavior happen again in the future, it's being reinforced somehow. That's the pure definition of reinforcement. It's happening again in the future, then it's reinforcement. So go back and think about that situation I described where there's the child in the corner, mama's making dinner, mama can't attend to child bangs their stick on the wall. And mom says, don't do that, sweetie. What are you doing? Those are your toys. You're going to break them. Mom goes back to cooking dinner. What we want to know and what we care about is, does little baby hit his toy on the wall again? If he does, it's reinforcement. It's been reinforced in some way. If it doesn't, then we have not provided reinforcement. But so regardless of what I did, regardless of how I responded, what it looked like, the only thing that matters is that behavior goes up again in the future. This is huge. People talk about reinforcement like, oh, it's a reward. Don't think about it that way. The definition of reinforcement is that a behavior happens again in the future. If it keeps happening, you reinforced it, or somebody reinforced it, whether you want to believe that or not. But I was reprimanding him, but I was telling him, no, doesn't matter. If it happened again in the future, it's reinforcement. And that's real important, because if you're here tonight, my guess is that the problem behavior of your child has been reinforced, or else it wouldn't be happening again. It wouldn't be happening if it hadn't been reinforced. So it's been reinforced. There's been some consequence that's been applied that has resulted in that behavior happening again in the future. And that's what we care about. Okay. A lot of meat here, a lot of stuff. You guys are hanging in. By the end of this, you're all going to have BCBA Ds behind your name. So let's talk a little bit about just why is function so important? Well, you think about those functions that I just described: attention, tangible, escape, automatic. I'm going to say them again: attention, tangible, escape, and automatic. If you think about those 4 things, and you think about, well, why are they important, Amber? Why do they matter? Well, the way that we respond, the way that we manage the behavior all goes back to function. So regardless of whether it's hitting or kicking or screaming or hair twirling or hand flapping, we're going to treat it differently if it is maintained by attention than if it's maintained by escape. We're going to treat that differently than if it's maintained by access to a tangible item. Okay, so that's why the function is so important, is because how we respond to it is going to change based on why the behavior is occurring. Okay, how do you figure it out? Well, if I could teach you in 1 hour, I would have tackled a lot of world's problems. It's not easy to figure out. so I hope the information I'm giving you tonight will give you some insight to be looking at your child's behavior in a little bit of a different way, thinking about reinforcement, thinking about the functions. Board certified behavior analysts, or BCBAs, are people who are very well trained, and we have a lot of them at Trumpet, to assess this, to look and trying to figure out this function. We have a really cool tool in our field called a functional analysis. If you are working with a BCBA and they haven't done this yet and your child's engaging in problem behavior, you should ask them for a functional analysis. And I'm not talking about just collecting some data on what's happening. This is an analysis. This is controlling the conditions, the environment, to see if a behavior happens again. And I'll give you an analogy so you know a little bit about what this test is and why behavior analysts use it. And it's sort of like, if any of you have ever had allergies, I have allergies myself. And if you go to a really good a doctor who can assess you for allergies, they're going to do a test which basically involves sort of poking you and giving you exposure to different allergens to figure out what the specific thing is that's causing you to swell up or have your allergic reaction. And really good ones will give a control shot to. They'll poke you with something that is nothing. And then they'll sort of do this multiple times to figure out, well, what's the cause? What's the problem? Is it grass? Is it dogs? Is it dust? You know, what's causing the allergic reaction? This is what behavior analysts do with a functional analysis. They probe, they sort of, okay, what's causing the problem? And they do it under pretty tightly controlled conditions, so they can sort of get that, they do a control test in there to figure out, okay, let me remove all of these possible functions and reasons and see how much the behavior occurs, if at all. And they sort of test for the different functions. But that's the best analogy I can give you. And board certified behavior analysts are very good at this. Not everybody has expertise and experience. At Trumpet, we train people. In fact, I'm doing a boot camp style training right now with all of our clinicians on advanced FAs, making sure they know how to do an FA. Again, this is not just collecting data and writing some things down. This is like that allergy test. It's let me probe, let me see, let me identify, so we can figure out, is it attention? Is it tangible? Is it escape? Is it automatic, or is it some combination of all of those things? Sometimes there's some tricky stuff going on. Sometimes these kids can throw us through a loop and it's a combination, or there's something really unique about the attention. It's not just attention, it's diverted attention. It's not just when mommy's not paying attention to me, it's when mommy's talking to daddy. That's what really pisses me off, right? And that's what we see the problem behavior. So, you know, you can have all sorts of unique. Long story short, if you really, you know, I hope these tips help, but if you really feel like you're needing a little bit more of analysis, board certified behavior analysts are very well equipped to do this, and particularly the ones at Trumpet. Okay, so let's get to the 10 tips. Here we go. Let's talk about the things I think that you can do. Hopefully you can kind of assess and figure out, like, what the heck is going on? Why is my kid doing this? Come up with some hypotheses, be a little bit of a detective, be a little bit of a researcher, right? You kind of can test things out. Well, what if I give them a little attention? What if I don't give them a little attention? What happens? But if you can do that, even if you can get a general idea of why a behavior might be occurring, these tips can help you then, because you're thinking about attention, you're thinking about access to an item, you're thinking about automatically maintained behavior, right? The behavior produces its own reward. So here's my recommendations. The 10 tips. First, give good instructions. I can't tell you how many times I do this all the time too with my son, so I'm not blaming you. But I can't tell you how many times I hear a parent give this instruction that's so incredibly long. Not because they're intentionally trying to confuse the kid, but it's go get your shoes and your jacket, and we got to go to school, and let's get out the door. We got to go right now. And the kid's just like, whoa, that's a lot of instructions, particularly for kids who have language delays. they may be only hearing part of that, and they may be just saying, no way, or I just want to get out of this. I don't know what she's asking me to do, but it sounds like a lot, and I just want to get out of it. And so I recommend to people, just give good instructions. And you might be saying to yourself, well, what are good instructions? Simple, something as simple as possible. If you have multiple steps, just break them down. Get shoes, get jacket, go to door, get me a high five, whatever the things are that you need the kid to do, make them super, super simple. So it's not, I got to run 500 miles for mom and dad today. It's, I just got to give them a high five. Okay, I can do that. It's no problem. So one request at a time. This is another really good recommendation. Try to word your instructions as statements and not questions. So this is something that very commonly happens, and that is, do you want to come inside and have dinner? Do you want to go to bed? Do you want to put your shoes on? And of course, if you have a kid who has any kind of language, the answer, of course, to that is no, which is perfectly appropriate, and which is a correct answer to the question, do you want? And so if there is a choice, then please do ask the question. Most oftentimes, though, there's not a choice. Most oftentimes it's go to bed, get your diaper changed, right? Get in the house. And so state it as direction, because you're going to want to follow through with that. You're going to want to follow through with the instruction and not change it and get them through with it. But if you've given a simple instruction that's short, and you have not formed it as a question, you're sort of setting yourself up for success here. It's easy. It's not a question, it's a demand. Mama's telling you what you got to do right now. And then this is a really important one. If you don't take anything else from my talk tonight, please take this. And that is frame things as do statements, not don't statements. So I always tell people, tell your child what they should do, not what they shouldn't do, right? So try to avoid, don't kick your feet on the wall, don't throw your toys, don't do this, don't do that. It's very easy to say those things, but what that doesn't do is A, give your child something that they should do instead, and B, it doesn't give you anything to reinforce, right? And except for the stopping of it, which really is kind of weird. Great job stopping throwing your toys. Good job, mommy's so proud of you. So try to always word things in the what they should do, right? The other thing that's nice about that is it avoids the sort of negative, like having a reprimand, right? Don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't think you should ever say to your child, no, or don't do that, but most kids, especially kids who have language delays, they don't know what to do instead. Okay, well, if I can't or if I can't throw my toys at the wall, what should I do instead? And so it can be something as simple as, don't throw your toys at the wall, versus, oh, put your toy over here. Let's go play with your toy on the ground, right? So simple. But by taking your toy over there and putting it on the ground, you're automatically telling the kid, don't do that thing, do something else with it. But you never have to say, don't do that thing. You get to say, come do this other thing. And then you get to provide a lot of praise for a more productive behavior. So that's an important one. It's hard to do. It's very hard to do. Okay, so know ahead of time if you're going to be able to follow through. I've worked with a lot of behavior analysts, and I've been in this field for 20 years, and especially the younger ones, I love them all, but sometimes you'll hear a behavior analyst say to you, if you give an instruction, you have to follow through with that instruction. You have to follow through. And I'm here, Dr. Valentino's here to tell you, give yourself some grace. That is not a bad recommendation. And it is true that you might reinforce problem behavior if you don't follow through, but you have a hard job. You're a parent, you're doing all sorts of things, you're working hard, and there are going to be times when you can't follow through. And I'm here to tell you that's okay. And what I want to tell you is just to recognize it early. Recognize if you can't follow through and try not to give the instruction in the first place, But if you have to give the instruction and you can't follow through with it, just release the demand very quickly, because what that's going to do is it's going to avoid the shaping up of all of this problem behavior that the kid's going to try to engage in to get out of the demand, and it's going to reinforce, you're eventually going to reinforce something way worse. So let me just give you a very good example here. So I say to my child, put your shoes away, right? That's the instruction. And I'm like, oh, I'm tired, guys. Like, this has been a long day. I don't have the energy to prompt, to follow through, to get him to put his shoes away. He says, no. And I'm like, I'm tired. I'm just gonna say, okay, you don't have to. I'm gonna stop right there. Versus, put your shoes away, Johnny. Put your this is ridiculous. Come on, put your shoes away. No, throwing something, water at your face, and then you finally say, okay, you don't have to. I don't have the energy today. You don't have to. So recognize it early. If you cannot give the instruction in the first place because it's not a critical instruction, then don't worry about it. But if you can't follow through, just reinforce early. Give yourself some grace. It's okay, because it's better for you to reinforce the little lesser kind of mild one than it is the real extreme one. Okay, I want to make sure we get through all the tips. Reinforce early in the game. Okay, I already kind of got to that one. Again, yeah, I think we're fine there. I want to make sure there's time for questions. Okay, provide positive attention when it's not easy to. So go back to that example of you're in the kitchen, dad is in the kitchen cooking dinner, mom's cooking dinner, kids in the corner, you can't pay attention. Outside of the context of problem behavior, try and provide some attention. So I've had parents who will have a small timer with them to remind themselves to every couple of minutes when the child is not banging their toys on the wall, when they're not, hey, buddy, how are you doing? You're doing great. I love the way you're playing over there. Provide attention when it's not easy to. That's going to be real helpful for you. Give access to things when it's not easy to, right? Most of us tend to ignore and not give stuff to a kid who's behaving well, right? You think about that kid in the back of the classroom. If he's doing his work and he's not loud and he's not disruptive, guess what? The teacher doesn't bother him, lets him go. And as soon as he starts to call out or pick on his peer, that's when he starts to get attention or access to things. And so when I say give things when it's not easy to, give things when the child is being not a bother in any way, when the child is just, hey, I'm just here and I'm hanging out, I'm cool, that's when you want to layer in the good stuff, not when the problem behavior happens. Okay. Teach communication, any form. There can be some technicalities here. And so behavior analysts have a really good way of figuring out what kind of communication. But what I want to say to you is just find something your child can do, even if they're not vocal. Anything they could do, tap you on the shoulder, tap the table. I had a little girl that I worked with once, and she did not have motor skills. She had a rare genetic diagnosis disorder that she wasn't going to develop the ability to walk. She wasn't going to develop the ability to move her hands in a very sophisticated way. We taught her just a little button press. She had this little button on her wheelchair, and it had her mom's voice recorded that said, come here. And she would press that as a way to get her mom to come and just tend her and give her the things that she wanted. And so I tell you that story just to tell you, it doesn't have to be vocal communication, but what you want to do is teach a child, okay, you want attention, tap mommy on the back. You want a toy, maybe a little gesture for it, a little sign, a little gesture, or you want an edible item, give daddy this picture card, right? Give daddy this picture card, give daddy a picture, and teach that not when the problem behavior is happening, but other times. Just when you run little trials, right? I have this candy that you want. You give me the picture. Look, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to help you. Give me the picture. Okay, sure, have this candy, right? You do it when the problem behavior is not happening. You practice that. Okay, I'm in the kitchen. We're going to run these little 5-minute sessions, right? I'm in the kitchen, and dad's there. Maybe dad helps out. Dad prompts to tap mom on the back. Oh, that's how you get my attention. Very good. Oh, that's how you get my attention. Right? You practice that communication. Okay. Safety first. I need to say this. Keep everybody safe. If your child's engaged in real severe behavior, safety's first. Doesn't matter what you're reinforcing or what you're not reinforcing. You want to keep everybody safe. And sometimes that might mean that a lot of stuff I'm talking to you about has to go out the door, but don't try and, follow through with an instruction, or, try and get yourself in there, teach them communication if, glass is being broken and things are happening that are not keeping everybody safe. Okay. Any of you have ever watched the TV series Veep? I highly recommend it if you haven't. It's a really, really good series. And there is a really funny scene on there where President Selena Meyer, she's played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and her daughter and her partner, Catherine and Marjorie, have a son, and the son is doing something, and Julia is telling the child no, and the parents quickly say to her, "Don't tell him no. We don't use that word. We don't use the no word in our house." And she kind of jokingly said, "Well, what am I supposed to say then? What do I say?" And the response from the baby's parents were, "That's not our plan." So you can't say no, but you can say that's not our plan. So I tell you that story because it's funny. It's not that you can't ever tell your child no, although I do like that's not our plan. But you got to stick to the positive, right? So a little bit drawing back to that tip I gave you before, instead of telling the child all the time, "Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. No, 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 no." What should we do? "Hey, come over here. Oh, hey, look, I found a toy over here. Hey, give me your hand. Let's go outside," right? Stick to the, what am I supposed to do? One, you avoid all that reprimanding. "Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this." You sound like a broken record, and you probably feel like one too. But then it also just gives you this chance to reinforce the good things. "Oh, you came with me. Good job. Okay, let's sit here. Oh, that's awesome. Way to go." Okay. Stay neutral. Try not to let your emotions get ahead of you. It's normal, especially if you're tired and frustrated, to get real animated, maybe, in saying no, or "That's not our plan," or something that you're trying to say to your child. Try and stay neutral when problem behavior occurs, because a lot of kids, I'll tell you, the reinforcing value of seeing you get a little bit worked up, or even a lot worked up, is really high, and you just run the risk, if those reactions are very big, of making things worse. Okay. This is the last tip, I believe. Examine the impact of your behavior on your child's behavior. I think this is the best thing that you can do. And so if you say at the end of this talk, "Amber, you said a lot of things." And you said a lot of really complicated things. I hope they're not too complicated, but you said a lot of things that I'm not sure about, and I'm not sure I know what to do. Play a little scientist in your world, right? See what happens if you do X, Y, Z. Remember, you now know what reinforcement means. Reinforcement means a behavior happens again in the future. So you can kind of play around. Well, what if I respond differently? What if I follow through with this instruction? What if I do this, right? You kind of play around with how your behavior influences child behavior. I'll tell you one thing, and then we're going to stop and give a few more moments for questions. But one of the best things in my experiences has been when a parent has the opportunity, it's happened many times in a career, where the parent has the opportunity to watch that allergy test that I just explained to you, the functional analysis, because you just see the lights go off in their eyes. They're like, oh, because they're basically seeing how those immediate consequences influence their child's behavior. And it's like a water faucet. You can turn the behavior on, you can turn the behavior off, turn the behavior off. You have the chance to watch a functional analysis, even if it's not your own kid. It is a powerful thing to watch, because it's so strategic in the way it manipulates the environment, and you don't realize the amount of influence that you have over the child's behavior until you see it in action. And so I tell you that because I know you're not going to run an FA after we get off the call today, but if you have the chance to watch a really good behavior analyst do one, or you can kind of think that way, you can sort of play around with the variables, the consequences. What happens immediately afterward, and does my child's behavior get worse or does it get better? And you can use that to guide some of your decisions. Okay, I finished all my material with 5 minutes to spare. So my understanding is that we are going to give the opportunity to ask questions, and those will come through the chat. So I'm ready to answer any of your questions. and they are anonymous. So if you're nervous about sharing or asking your question, the only people that can see them are Emily and I. So please feel free and use the chat. So Emily, if I missed something, let me know, but please feel free. And oh, you're welcome, of course. We're just getting some thank yous. Yeah, so Anastasia's, sorry, I apologize. They are anonymous. Maybe somebody could ask another question. How about I'll insert a different question in there and then I'll make yours anonymous. So yeah.
It's okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
It's late. Yeah, so the question is, can I speak a little bit more about the ABC model? Yeah, definitely. So I was describing the ABC model in a lot of what I just talked about, but essentially the ABC model is the antecedent. That is what happens right before the behavior itself, what it looks like, and then the consequence, that is what happens right after the behavior. So let's take a scenario from one of the examples that I just gave you, with the child in the side of the kitchen, mom is making dinner. The antecedent would, in this situation, be the mom restricted her attention. The behavior would be I bang on the wall, and the consequence would be mom provides, hey, don't do that, you're not supposed to hit your toys, right? So it's just that, we call it a little snapshot. It's like a little picture of what's happening, and it's immediately before what the behavior looks like, and then the consequence. And that's how behavior analysts think about behavior. We typically don't look at like what happened 3 days ago. Not that that stuff isn't important. If a child wasn't sleeping well or they were sick, absolutely that stuff is important. But what we care about is that snapshot, that ABC, what happened right before, what is the behavior, and what directly followed it, or what was the consequence. Yeah, so the next question is, how do we work with automatic behavior? How do I help to reduce it? I will say automatically maintained problem behavior can be very tricky to treat. There are different ways depending on what's going on with your child, but generally speaking, the thing that you want to try and do is compete with it in some way. So we do a lot of what we call, try not to use too many technical terms here, but competing items. So the idea being, this feels good, but if we can get your hands doing something else that also feels good or even feels better, we can sort of compete with the value of that automatically reinforced behavior in a way that shifts your responding to be focused on that other proactive behavior. That's one way. There's other things. There's a treatment called a differential reinforcement of other behavior. That's a big term, but it basically just means we're providing some valuable things when the behavior doesn't happen. Again, the general gist behind that is to compete with it, right? This isn't all that dissimilar if you think about some of your own automatically maintained behavior. Like if you do this, some people might take a stress ball and use the stress ball instead, because it's a little bit more of a socially appropriate way to get that sensation. That's the idea behind it. Yeah, so, and then the next part of that is what if it's a vocal sound? It can be challenging. Same idea applies. You can try to get the child engaging in some vocal responses that can then be reinforced. The nice thing about vocal responding is that you can't do two of the responses at once. So you can't speak functionally and engage in vocal stereotypy. So the more you can get a child engaged in that functional vocal communication, the better. And then the other part of that is just try to make the times where they're not doing that valuable. So again, that differential reinforcement procedure where there's some things happening when you're not doing the behavior can really be helpful. There's some other more sort of technical procedures that you can implement. This is a hard one though, so I appreciate the person asking this question. There's several variations, but that would be my recommendation to start. Yeah, great question. Awesome. Anything else? I know we're right at the hour, so I'm sure you all have places to be. Yeah, so the question is, can children who don't have autism, but they're dealing with severe behavior in the classroom, receive ABA? Yes. If your child is in school, I would talk to the school about somebody doing a functional analysis and doing an assessment, and the school absolutely should do that for you. If you are looking at going through private insurance, not having that autism diagnosis can be a barrier, but there may be some ways that you can access different types of funds through regional centers in your area or other places. But I would start with the school district. If it sounds like your child is in school, I would start there. Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to be here. You're welcome.
We had another question come through, Amber, and it was, what about reducing picking facial skin? So if the child is a teenager and doesn't want to use the stress ball, do you have any other ideas for that?
And do you think it's automatically maintained? Do you hypothesize that it's just, it feels good, or that there's some other social consequence for it?
Automatic.
Yeah, you can think about some other ways. If the individual has some vocal communication skills, you might talk to them about what another behavior they could do might be, but the goal would be to, whatever that sensation is that's being produced, to somehow replicate it into some more socially appropriate form. Yeah, there's another really great question. I'll definitely address it. So is it considered ABA to try to get a person to stop doing those automatic items or those behaviors? And no, not, well, it is considered ABA, but they're not always problematic. So I've certainly worked with people in the past who have had a automatically maintained behavior, such as vocal stereotypy. Somebody was asking about that earlier. And it's an important part of their existence and their life. And so we have worked to find a place where they can do that behavior, and it's just narrowed, or it's focused on one particular part of their day. So not getting rid of it altogether, but saying, okay, well, these are the spaces and these are the times that we're going to have you do it. And that's very similar to what a lot of people do with their automatically maintained behavior. Like, I can't do this thing in public, or I can't do this thing under certain kind of audiences or conditions, and so I just do it at this other time. And so it doesn't have to always be get rid of it altogether. And particularly if the person has an opinion about that and they can vocalize that, then it may just be working with them to navigate the social world and to put it in a way or context that is going to be helpful to them socially in the long run.
There's another question on how do we help the child's teacher be more aware of positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll translate this a little bit, but I think I know what you're getting at. It's like the teacher's reprimanding the child. It's, yeah. Oh, how do you do that? You talk to them about it. I think if there's any way for the teacher to get some education in some basic behavior analysis and behavior management, I think that can be helpful. And if you have a good relationship with them, maybe just asking, like, can we get you into, hey, I went to this really cool training by Amber Valentino, and can we get you into something similar, because I heard some things that might be really helpful for my child, and I'd love for you to learn. If you have a good relationship with them, maybe just talking to them about it, like, hey, and kind of playing a little bit naive, like, I just heard about this thing and I thought it was really interesting that these reprimands can actually make behavior worse. What do you think about that? So I think dialogue, I think potentially getting some extra training and support can be very helpful. Yeah. And this video is going to be available on our website. So all of my tacky jokes will be permanently recorded forever on the interwebs. including that one.
And we will also email out the link for this video too to everybody who's on the call as well. So you'll be able to access it on the website through email as well.
And it looks like there's another question about a child who's high functioning and we're trying to get paying attention. So yeah, just depending on what's going on, there would probably be some additional assessment we'd want to do in that situation. It could be that the content is not very interesting, or it's overly challenging. And so you're seeing this not paying attention or distracted behavior happening. And so there's actually this really cool article in our field around what's a treatment model for escape maintain problem behavior. So basically like what's going on with a child that would make them want to get out of that thing in your situation class, and how do you think about it? And one of the very first recommendations in that paper is to look at the curriculum. It's to look at, is the curriculum appropriate? Is it good? Is it interesting? Is it too hard? Is it too easy? And start there. So just based on that question and it being very me not having a whole lot of information, I start with that just to see, is there something about the curriculum, the teaching style that just either is super boring or not interesting, enough, or she's not getting enough chances to practice responding, that kind of thing. That's what I would look at first. Yeah, these are great questions. They're really fantastic. I think we got them all.
I think we did.
Yeah, my pleasure. You're welcome.
Well, and just thank you to everybody for attending tonight too. We really appreciate you carving out some time to learn from the wonderful Amber. And like we mentioned, all of this video will be linked on our website. So it's great if you want to share with teachers too, to provide some education. And we will be emailing that out too. It looks like we've got one more question coming through too. But like we said, this will be on the website, and we will email that out so that you will have this. There's also an array of resources on our website that link to different blogs that are specific to managing behaviors and some more specific topics within that. So definitely use that as a resource as well as you start to navigate some of these.
Absolutely. Okay.
See if there's one more question coming through.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So we've got a question about some problem behavior that seems it's an older child and seems to be wanting to get out of things, and their violent behaviors. So when you have a bigger kid and you have a behavior that's getting dangerous, you're probably going to need some help, and you're probably going to need some help by somebody who can safely navigate the reason that problem behavior might be happening. In a case where we have a kid who's really big and things are getting violent and things are not safe, you might think about modifying the environment in a way that minimizes the risk. And it could be that we don't have to ask the kid to do so many things for purely safety reasons. But I would try and get somebody, if you can, in there to look at it a little bit more closely. It doesn't mean you can never ask your 16-year-old to do anything ever again. That's not a good strategy. But to keep things safe, if the problem behavior is severe and it seems to be escape maintain, you might just lower the expectations for a little while and then just try and get somebody to get in there and assess and treat it. Yeah. Good question. Those are tough cases for sure. Okay. What else do we have here? Recommended materials for teachers. Oh my gosh, go to our website, Emily. We have some good stuff on there. That's probably a good start.
Yes, I can follow up with, I can see who asked that question
Okay,
too, so I can follow up with
awesome.
you.
Yeah, we'll get some information. Sounds like we need to get in the schools and do some teacher support. That would be so fun. Yeah, an older, so we're getting a question just from somebody who maybe has an older child and assuming it's just attitude. Well, teenagers do have attitude, that's for sure. I can appreciate that. And there certainly could be some complicated things happening, no question, especially when the more verbal a child gets, you get into rule governed behavior. Basically, they're following rules in their environment, but that's just a long way of saying that the things I spoke about, they do govern human behavior. So it doesn't necessarily matter if it's me, an adult, or if it's a small child or a big child, a child with a disability or a child without a disability, those functions still apply. And so it would be just figuring out what the reason is, regardless of the age and the functioning level. Now, that being said, things, like I said, things can get a little bit more complicated. Like all of our behaviors are not as clear cut as we might want. They can be multiply controlled. There could, like I said, there could be rules, like people follow rules that they haven't necessarily experienced the consequences for, but they follow rules. And so you can have those kinds of things. But yeah, you don't have to just chalk it up to being attitude. You can definitely look and find the function and get some treatment in place. Awesome. Anything else? Yeah, my pleasure. Please reach out if there is anything we can do to help. We're happy to get you some guidance. All right, Emily, what do you say? Should we wrap it up?
I think we shall. Thank you so much, Amber.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all very much. Have a great night. And
Yes.
please reach out to us if you need anything else.
Definitely. Thanks so
All
much,
right, take
everybody.
care. Okay, bye.